Welcome to today's speech, A Forest of Junipers, the life and legacy of Brother Juniper. Today, I want to talk about the lives of the saints, specifically one of the earliest followers of St. Francis, Brother Juniper. Let me begin with a tale that might sound absurd at first, but one that reveals the heart of a man whose faith was unpretentious as it was unyielding. Imagine, if you will, a quiet friary in the rolling hills of medieval Italy. A sick brother lies in his bed, weakened, longing for comfort. He confides in Brother Juniper, one of St. Francis's earliest companions, that nothing would ease his suffering quite like a simple pig's foot to eat. And without a moment's hesitation, Brother Juniper grabs a knife, dashes into the nearby forest where pigs roam. Spotting one, he seizes it, severs the foot right on the spot, and rushes back to prepare it for a nourishing meal for his ailing friend. The sick friar there devours it with gratitude, and his spirits are lifted by this act of kindness. But oh, the consequences. You see, the pig's owner was furious at the maiming of his livestock. He storms to the friary and demands justice from St. Francis himself. Brother Juniper, confronted with this uproar, responds with defensiveness, does not respond with defensiveness or regret, but with pure, childlike joy. You see, he explains his actions as a straightforward expression of brotherly love, even suggesting that if it brought about such comfort, he'd gladly do the same to 100 pigs if it pleased God. St. Francis witnessed this. He could only marvel at Juniper's unshakable spirit. And as the story goes, he turned to his companions and exclaimed, "Would to God, my brethren, that I had a forest full of such junipers." Now, this anecdote, drawn from the cherished book The Little Flowers of St. Francis, isn't just a quirky footnote in Franciscan history. It opens a window into Brother Juniper's soul. For he is a man whose simplicity wasn't naivete, but a profound embodiment of Christ's call to charity. In his impulsive generosity, we see the gospel alive. Give to everyone that begs from you, as St. Luke teaches us. Juniper didn't weigh costs or consequences. He saw need and he met it with love, trusting that divine providence would sort out the rest. This radical charity, it challenges us today. And in our world of calculated kindness, it asks us, how often do we let simplicity guide us to profound acts of compassion for our neighbors? Now, St. Juniper, as Brother Juniper, he was born in the 13th century. Little is known about his life before he joined the Friars Minor in about 1210. He was personally received by St. Francis himself, and he became a lay brother, which is not a cleric, embodying the order's ideals of poverty, humility, and service. Stories about his eccentric ways included how he once cooked a massive stew by tossing in a whole unplucked chicken and unshelled eggs because he reasoned that it saved time for prayer. He gave away all of his clothes to beggars so often that his superiors had to forbid it under obedience. Yet, ever as creative as he was, he'd whisper to the needy soul, "I can't give you my cloak, but if you take it, I will not resist." Now these acts painted him as a holy fool for Christ, which echoes St. Paul's words in Corinthians, to be fools for Christ's sake, whose apparent madness unmasks worldly folly and draws us closer to God's own wisdom. See, St. Francis saw in Juniper the epitome of Franciscan virtue. In the Mere Perfection, Francis says that Francis is recorded as saying that a good friar should emulate the qualities of his companions, including the patience of Brother Juniper, who attained a state of perfect patience by keeping the truth of his lowliness always before him, whose supreme desire was to follow Christ on the way of the cross. What higher praise from Francis himself? Juniper's life reflected the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit, the meek, those who endure ridicule for righteousness' sake. You see, his joyful indifference to personal honor freed him to love without reserve. He taught us true virtue blooms in humility and not in acclaim. Now let's turn to a poignant moment near the end of Juniper's life. His presence at the deathbed of St. Clare of Assisi in 1253. And as the foundress of the Poor Clares lay dying, surrounded by her sisters, Brother Juniper was there at her side, consoling her with prayers and words of comfort. But why him, you might wonder? Juniper's deep devotion to the Passion of Christ mirrored Clare's own contemplative life, steeped in meditation on Jesus' sufferings. You see, his simplicity and unwavering faith made him a fitting companion in her final hours, offering not grand theology, but the quiet presence of a soul attuned to God's love. And from this, we learn a vital lesson in our most vulnerable moments. What matters isn't eloquence or status, but authentic companionship, which is rooted in Christ. It reminds us to be present in the sufferings and dyings in our own midst, embodying the gospel's call to comfort the afflicted with humble, prayerful solidarity. Juniper shows us that even in death's shadow, charity prevails and draws us into eternal communion. Yet, for all of his sanctity, Brother Juniper remains officially titled just Servant of God, which is the Church's first step toward sainthood. Acknowledging his heroic virtue, but stopping short of beatification or canonization. You see, he died on January 29th of 1258, and he's buried in Rome's Araceli Church. He's venerated, especially amongst the Franciscan circles. But why hasn't his cause advanced further? Perhaps it's fitting for a man who shunned worldly recognition. His life is one of hidden holiness, not public spectacle. For in an era where the Church prioritized canonizing founders like Francis or scholars like St. Bonaventure, Juniper's anecdotal legacy was preserved mostly in folklore rather than in formal records, and may have been overlooked. Or maybe in God's providence, his story inspires without the need of official stamps and urges us to seek sainthood, you and I, to seek sainthood in everyday folly for Christ rather than in grand gestures. Friends, Brother Juniper calls us back to the essentials: a faith simple yet profound, a charity bold and boundless. And in a complex world, we may cultivate our own forest of junipers, hearts willing to appear foolish for love's sake. As St. Francis wished, let us follow Christ in such patience and joy. Thank you.